Lineup today, we focus on the journey travelled by South Africans in transforming the state and society into democracy since 1994. We talk youth unemployment with Deputy Minister Buti Manamela following the report released by Statistics South Africa on the status of the youth. We'll also bring you coverage of the Women's Commission of the South African Local Government Association, SALGAM, lobbying for 50-50 representation at local government. But first, the Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, has told Parliament that even though government's 20-year review report demonstrates progress achieved in addressing the challenges of inequality, unemployment and poverty, not much progress has been achieved in changing the structure of the economy. Minister Radebe was addressing Parliament during the budget debate of the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation.
In 1994, we embarked on a long and arduous journey towards healing the wounds of our painful past and transforming our country and society into a truly democratic one. In embarking on this journey, we knew that it would be hard and that there would be hills and valleys. We knew that there would be obstacles in some sections of the journey and would need to clear the bushes to make the way. Good travelers pack everything they think they will need along the way. We did exactly that in 1996 when we adopted the Constitution, which sets out the values that we want in society as South Africans. The preamble to our Constitution commits us to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. All these commitments set out our task as members of Parliament, the executive, the judiciary, as well as all sectors of society. On this occasion of a year in which we celebrate the milestone 20th anniversary of our Constitution, we should accordingly reflect on whether or not we are equal to the challenge and ask ourselves, among others, the following questions. Are we living out the values of our Constitution? Are we acting in ways that contribute towards healing the divisions of the past? Do the programs that we adopt and implement truly improve the quality of life of citizens? Are we succeeding in freeing the potential of each person? And how much progress have we made in building a united and democratic South Africa? In this month, being Freedom Month, we celebrate 22 years of democracy, which means that we have made a transition into adulthood as a country. We have entered a stage in which we can no longer use a lack of experience to explain our shortcomings. We have to raise our game because it is what our people expect of us. As we undertook the political transformation of our country to reflect the ideals of our Constitution that our people fought for, we adopted a number of policies and programs. As you know, the work of the greater part of the first 2 decades of our freedom is captured in our 20-year review report. While the 20-year review report demonstrated the progress we achieved in addressing the trio challenges of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, we have made less progress in changing the structure of our economy. This in turn impacts on the overall progress we could make in attending to these challenges. Greater efforts are therefore required to broaden inclusion and ownership in the economy.
After the break, we talk about the status of the youth 22 years into democracy. Stay tuned.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
When Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for. trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back. This year marks 4 decades since the youth of 1976 changed the landscape of politics in apartheid South Africa. It's also 22 years since the dawn of democracy in 1994. But a report released by Statistics South Africa paints a gloomy picture about the status of black and coloured youth. Stats SA found that many black and coloured young people are dropping out of school before reaching matric, are unemployed and involved in crime. In an interview recorded earlier, we spoke with the Deputy Minister in the Presidency responsible for youth development, Buti Manamela, about the various challenges facing young people in South Africa. On the report from Stats SA, Manamela said significant progress has been made in the development of youth over the past 22 years.
The number of school-going children going to school now have significantly increased from 2002 to 2014, according to the Stats SA report. And more than 65% of children going to school today are going to no-fee schools, are receiving nutrition and all of that. And the situation was worse off in 1994. I think we need to look at it differently in that way. And secondly, that there's a pressure put by parents and by peers to grade 12 learners particularly, that the only education that's available is university education. Even if a kid goes there and study, professions which are already overly populated, meaning that we've got many of those who are unemployed in that profession. So that's why I would like to encourage more young people to go and study in TVET colleges, to be artisans. If you look at government spending now, we're directing it towards infrastructure development. We're building, power stations. We're building roads. And we cannot do that when we have more lawyers or or more clergy or whatever. So I think we need more engineers. We need more electricians. We need all those types of professions. And that's why I want the young people to focus on that. If you look at TVETs, 5 years ago, the intake was 300,000. Today, it's more than 700,000, and the target is 1 million, with 12 more new FET colleges being built. And, if you look at universities also, for instance, we're about to reach 1 million mark of young people going to university. But we think that a lot more still needs to be done, because more young people are out of the education system, particularly at further and higher education.
That's one aspect of the issues that are facing young people. Another issue is employment and employability. We've had a youth employment accord to try and address some of the issues that face young people, but also industry in taking in young people. What would you count as the impact of that accord, but also challenge areas that need to be addressed to get more young people employed?
Look, since governments signing together with other social partners of the Youth Employment Accord, more than 500,000 young people got absorbed into the employment sector. But we've learned other lessons from there. Firstly, that a lot of companies have not been giving reports to the Department of Economic Development on how many young people they've employed as a consequence of the Youth Accord. Secondly, that there would always be those competing interests amongst young people and older people have always been in employment. We have been, for instance, threatened with constitutional action, because if you say that companies should prefer young people for employment, you're essentially discriminating against older people. So there are regulations that we have been pursuing. We've asked the legal fundis to tell us what is it that is contradictory to the Constitution, because the issue of youth unemployment is a big issue. But the third and big thing is that we are encouraging young people to become entrepreneurs, because the big problem is getting more and more young people not only looking for employment, but owning their own companies and signing or rather giving out payslip rather than searching for payslip. So essentially that's the kind of direction that we want young people to be taking.
This discussion about young people being entrepreneurs has been going for a long time. Yeah. We've heard a merge of two structures to build the NYDA. Yeah. But some will say not everybody will be an employer, not everybody will have a business. Yeah. Are we providing enough avenues or other avenues outside of the NYDA model for young people to develop?
Yeah. Look, what the president said, which has now become our mandate, is to see the NYDA as just but one agency that will be implementing government's policies on youth development. But our mandate is to make sure that the whole of government should make youth development a priority. So what we've now done is we've taken the National Youth Policy 2020, we sent to all government departments, how does this reflect on your annual performance plans? So they need to say to us that we're taking this much number of young people as interns, we're supporting this number of young businesses, we are taking this number of young people into employment or into training and all of that. So the assessment of the performance of government departments on youth is going to be different from now onwards. But what we've also said to the IDC, CIFA and all these other government funding agencies is they need to be reflecting to us as to how many young people are they creating platforms for young people to be entrepreneurs. And I must say that the picture has been looking gloomier, but once we ask them that key question, then it pushes them into action to say we need to be prioritizing young people.
The issue of alcohol, drugs, alcohol abuse amongst young people has been a thorny issue for a while. You have communities that talk about kids using nyaope and other substances that even the law is not in place yet to set criminal matters for it. Yeah. The Social Development Department has been talking about building rehabilitation centers in closer to communities and getting rehabilitation services. But are we addressing issues of community structures and community services to get young people or to keep them on the right track before they fall into drugs?
Look, I mean, you need to create alternative platforms for young people to be able to, stay away from drugs and alcohol and other substance abuse. Firstly, it has to be addressed at the basic unit of society, which is the family. Government can do as much as it can, for instance, to ensure that drug peddlers stay off the street and are in jail. Government can do as much as it can, to build rehabilitation centers and all of that. And the youth policy says to the Department of Social Development, we need a youth rehabilitation center in every province, if possible in every district. But as long as these issues are not addressed at a family unit level, which I think would complement all the other efforts that government is doing, I think that we will not win the war against drugs. But secondly, that there are policies that government are looking into in terms of alcohol advertisements and all of that, which we think will help curb the abuse of alcohol amongst young people. But the message we want to send out to young people out there is that alcohol, drugs and other substance abuse does not pay. The are sufficient platforms, recreational activities, schools, universities that are there which young people should be pursuing. And we're hoping that, we will shun all these things which we do not believe are going to be taking us anywhere into the future.
In light of the stats report on the status of youth in South Africa now, and all these issues we've been discussing, there have previously been calls for a youth ministry to have a specific focus on young people. Do you think it's time to put that back on the agenda?
Look, I think the issues are, you've got to look at what is the best way in which you want to deal with challenges that faces young people. Firstly, do you want to focus and narrow that into one ministry, whereas the issues of young people cut across the whole of government? Or secondly, do you want a specific ministry to be focusing on that at the expense of the strategy that we're using now of getting everyone to champion youth development? I think, and I think it's also to the prerogative of the president. But I think the fact that the president has said the minister and deputy minister in the presidency would focus on youth and youth development, I think that is a step towards the right direction. It may probably not be enough. It may be short of a youth ministry, but we are doing our best to ensure that, all the issues that affects young people, their needs, interests and aspirations are addressed through the ministry and also through the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation.
As we go to local government elections, the question is, what's the role of young people? Besides turning up to vote on election day, what is their role at local government level?
Look, South Africa is a young nation. 19.8 million people now are under the age of 35. We need to see more young people standing up, availing themselves as representatives at local government level. We need to see more young people providing that leadership at communities where they stay in. We need to see, more young people actively being involved in the different political parties to, help shape the future of of local government. A lot of skills are there amongst young people, which I believe will help change the face and state of local government. So they need to, step up and ensure that they create the change that is needed.
But do you think there is space to create youth-specific policy on how municipalities address issues of young people and their development? Because it's always young people at the forefront of service delivery protests in all municipalities.
No, most definitely. And I think that, one of the things which the National Youth Policy addresses the most is the absence of commitment and resources by local government to address youth-specific issues. But even beyond that, one of the things I was saying, last week at our budget vote debate on Stats SA, for instance, was the fact that youth interest and youth needs are not only about fighting alcohol and substance abuse or getting employment, but are also about creating communities where young people are able to find comfort. And I think that all of those can be done if young people steps up at a local government level.
Well, that interview was recorded earlier. Women are demanding 50-50 representation at local government. That's our story after the break.
The big news is Newsroom.
We also stream live on YouTube.
Whether you're at home, at the office, or at the gym, wherever you are, Newsroom is right there with you. bringing you all the latest news, updates, sports, weather, and everything in between. Get all the latest news you need on the go via live streaming on our YouTube channel. That's Newsroom, weekdays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. The Women's Commission of the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, has called on Parliament's multi-party Women's Caucus to support their lobby for more participation and representation of women in local government. The 50-50 campaign calls on all political parties to adopt a policy that ensures a 50% quota for the representation of women running for local government elections later this year. SALGA's Women Commission briefed Parliament's Women's Caucus on their campaign and on progress in establishing a Women's Caucus for municipalities.
You will see the impacts of statistics are reflecting either, should I be right? I think I'm right if I say a lack of commitment of political parties to honor the 50-50 and recognize that and implement it. When you see the statistics, you will find that in terms of our legislation and in terms of political party policies, not all political parties have adopted a 50-50 policy principle. So what you see there in terms of the finality of female PR proportional representative is that you have got 2,184, and in males you've got 2,626. That's a big gap to talk about a whole 500. It's plus minus 500, that is a gap. But when you look at ward, the ward does give you both an element that says even if political parties wanted to, however, the impacts of patriarchy are still there, where women are not seen as leaders at a local level, because the gaps are very wide. When you look at women, the final number is 1,413, and males are at 2,864, which is more than 50% of male. And that's an issue there, which I want to believe as politicians, we need to actually analyze clearly, closely, and do something about the mindset change in terms of our communities. We, however, committed to further strengthen the participation and representation of women in local government, and that would include integrating the 50-50 notion in SALGA governance programs for a gender-balanced group of decision makers at all levels. We committed ourselves to lobbying and supporting processes for the review and amendment of legislation and policies pertinent to the gender equality debate, in particular, the Municipal Structures Act and the Local Government Municipal Electoral Act, to be aligned to the 50-50 quota. Why we're getting here is because we see a danger in wanting to go to the Constitution, because it will need a constitutional review. However, if we were to actually target these legislations, it then suggests that no municipality will accept a political party that sends less than a 50-50, precisely on the basis that it is exactly at the local government. It can be taken to another level, but this is our lobby, which would probably want to invite you to assist us in this lobby. It might not be for the next term, but for the other term, the reviewal of legislation, the amendment of legislation could be an issue.
And in terms of legislation, Chairperson, I think we've got enough legislations in this country that are promoting the 50-50. We don't need any legislation unless otherwise we amend the ones that we are having. We've got enough legislations, we've got international laws that we have ratified.
We are not saying there's not enough legislation, but what we are saying, there is no legislation that enforces political parties to field 50-50 in terms of politicians. There's none. Hence, we're saying, if you look at it from a local perspective, Systems Act and the Local Government Electoral Act, it might influence even the National Electoral Act. Electoral Act is silent about whom you send as representation. In a sense, therefore, all the other legislations that are dealing with women issues and whatever, are not having enough steam to challenge the issue of representation. They don't. They speak as a choice. For instance, in one legislation, it say it may. Once you say may, you're not enforcing anything. There's one legislation that speaks about may. It does not enforce anything. You may do it, you may not do it. Nobody bothers. So I do want us to look closely at legislation on the issue of 50-50, not just other issues. The representation of 50-50 from political parties when they field from national, from provincial, from local.
I am wanting us to stand up and to fight for our human rights and to accept that women's rights are human rights. And also, obviously, patriarchy, which is such a stumbling block. And I certainly agree that as mothers, we should be taking the lead and showing our children, boys and girls, that they need to be independently thinking. We must treat our sons and teach them to respect ourselves as women and other women, and then we will get through to it.
For as long as we stop to say, ungu boy, wena uyintombi, we just normalize chores, we normalize however. Us, even now, we're still treating them differently. When we go with a boy, you still treat it differently, us sitting in this room. And it's something that you are doing unconsciously because Nati we've been socialized as such. So my view is that it shall take its time. However, there shall be a time if we continue to be tenaciously pulling this issue of 50-50 and the gender struggles.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's program. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of A View from the House. Until then, enjoy Freedom Day and goodbye.